Welcome to the Robert Hunt Financial Market Update. It's your host, Robert Hunt, where we look at the week's financial news that could be a bit confusing, misleading, and take you off course. We hope to make it actionable, understandable, and clear. What a week. What a show. We've brought the show back to Dallas from Montgomery, Texas. The whole crew, all the equipment, it's all back. Safe and sound. What a lineup we've got for you today. We're bringing in two Morgan Housel articles. The first one we're going to look at is A Message from the Past, Thoughts on Nostalgia. Boy, is it good. And then Housel has another article that came out actually a while back, September 23rd of this year. It says, do it your way. Do it your way. I couldn't agree more. You'll find out in a second. And then our final article, A Walk Down Memory Lane. This article came out today on the digital version of the Wall Street Journal. So for you paper Wall Street Journal folks, you'll probably get this tomorrow. But this is John McCone, who pioneered index funds and transformed investing, dies at 90. That's right. Our hero, John Bogle. There were actually others out there like Bogle, John McCone being one of them, who have absolutely changed our lives. And we can see why in a moment when we look at that article. And then as time allows, we're going to look into Robert's Corner, where we got loads of feedback on our housing versus S&P 500 tweet data. You remember that tweet data? I get, we got excellent feedback. I want to address some of the fine remarks that I received so you can be equipped. You can be equipped. So at the top, Housel's first look here, A Message from the Past, Thoughts on Nostalgia. Now, you listener may remember Morgan Housel. He wrote the book, The Psychology of Money. One of my favorites, an excellent book to read. Don't worry, you're safe. He is an index fund investor primarily. The bulk of investing is index funds, and then I think he's got a venture fund he does as well. But I loved this article. Okay, Housel begins the article by talking about when he first moved to Seattle. He was there, his girlfriend was there, and Housel was looking back and no kids, just footloose and fancy-free. And he looked back and said, wow, weren't those just the best days? And his girlfriend, now his wife, said, oh, you were more anxious, scared, and depressed than you've ever been. What? Housel had a certain version of history that didn't match up with reality. It took someone outside himself, his wife, to remind him of that. There's a Russian saying, Housel says, the past is more unpredictable than the future. Ha ha. It's so difficult for us to see the past correctly, and we're going to connect this with investing in a moment. So there's a dynamic that occurs here. Okay? Housel explains, when we study history, we know how the story ends, which makes it impossible to imagine what people were thinking or feeling in the past. Did you hear that? When we study history, we already know how it's going to end. We already know what's going to happen. When we watch that A&M LSU football game, we know who's going to win. We know what's going to happen. Hey, sometimes we forget how we felt at halftime, 17-7, don't we, guys? We forget. We don't remember how we actually felt in the past. We remember how we think we should have felt, given what we know today. Those are Housel's words I said at the end there. So, what about investing? Housel talks about this. Oh, and I get this same comment. Housel says, I was recently asked at a conference how investors should feel about the stock market, given that it's basically gone straight up over the last 15 years. You hear that? I get this comment. Again, how should investors feel about the stock market, given that it's basically gone straight up over the last 15 years? Housel first thought was, yeah, you're right. If you started 15 years ago and you checked your account for the first time, you'd gasp, you've made a fortune. However, and this is a good however, straight up last 15 years? To echo his wife, what are you talking about? Remember how Housel felt in Seattle? Anxious, depressed. But in hindsight, he thought it was the best time of his life. Here we go. Housel says, are we going to pretend like the 22% crash in the summer of 2011 never happened? Are we supposed to forget that stocks plunged more than 20% in 2016 and again in 2018? Are we, now pretending that the worst economic calamity since the Great Depression didn't happen in 2020? The European banking system nearly collapsed, wages are stagnant, and the Americans' national debt was downgraded. Housel so rightly says, at virtually every moment of the last 15 years, smart people argued the market was overvalued, recession was near, hyperinflation was around the corner, the country was bankrupt, the numbers were manipulated, the dollar was worthless, and on and on. Why do we forget these things? You remember this point? We forget these things because we know how the story ends. The stock market went up by a lot. So Housel says, if you held on tight, none of these past events even mattered. So it makes it easy to discount and ignore how we felt at the time. For someone that looks back and says, "Oh wow, that was easy. Money was easy. The market went straight up, all good." You didn't feel like that over the past 15 years. Did not feel like that at all. And boy, can I relate to Housel in that. I get the comment, and I hear it from my internal monologue. Yes, that's right. I talk to myself. But from my internal monologue, I can think the same thing. Like, oh, wow. The market sure has gone up a lot in the last 15 years. What am I supposed to make of that? That was kind of easy, wasn't it? No. Not even close. And how should that inform us of our decisions in the future? It's very dangerous. Very dangerous. It requires a real steel nerve. All those calamities I listed that Housel mentioned, those 20%, 22% dips, all those terrible headlines, that was the price of poker to get your amazing returns over the past 15 years. That, oh, by the way, not everyone got. Not everyone got those. In fact, for the short-term trader that was in and out and waiting until the market was good, they did not get the fantastic returns. They didn't get them. Because I care about you, the listener, I went back. Where was it? It was Mr. Charlie Munger. Charlie Munger had a great quote, and this quote was related to the stock market dropping and what sort of results you should receive if you can't handle the stock market dropping. And I'll paraphrase it, but what Munger said basically is that if you cannot, with equanimity, withstand a 50% drop in your stock market holdings, you deserve the mediocre investing returns you receive. He doesn't mince words, does he? If you can't stomach 50% declines in your investment, you will get the mediocre returns you deserve. I believe that the second quote's the actual quote. I did a paraphrase on the first one. I kind of like my version. But there you go. There you go. Tough to do better than Munger and Housel. So don't let anyone tell you, oh, what an easy road that was the past 15 years. If you were actually on that ride, and don't trick yourself. I think we can deceive ourselves. Nothing easy about it. Hardly. And then our next Housel article, headline, Do It Your Way, September 23rd. Housel starts by saying the ultimate success metric is whether you get what you want out of life. But that's harder than it sounds because it's easy to try to copy someone who wants something you don't. Oh. I see. He then gives a story about essentially an artist who joins a corporation and then gets smoked out. It's not a good fit at all. But what I liked about this article was and I think this is so important, he personalizes personal finance. He writes, it's so common to, on one hand, recognize how much variety there is among people, different personalities, backgrounds, goals, skills. But on the other hand, ask, what's the best way to do this thing? As if there can be one universal answer for vastly different people. Whoa, isn't that true? I am suspicious of one solution for the client, for the investor. Great quote here. More damage is caused not by dumb financial plans, but by reasonable ones that just aren't right for you. I might need to start giving out that bumper sticker. More damage is caused not by dumb financial plans, but by reasonable ones that just aren't right for you. You know what a reasonable financial plan is that might not be right for you? Invest in index funds. Heresy. Burn him at the stake. How could he say this? Yes. It's not for everyone. Not for everyone. This side of the Garden of Eden, certainly not for everyone. You must do the work and be willing to invite objective advisors into your life to tell you, right now where you are with your ability to accept volatility, it ain't for you. You got to play a different game. So, I like financial testimonials. Everyone I work with, I want to take to a financial testimonial. That's where they tell me how they grew up with money, how they relate to it, how they were educated as a child and young adult on how to manage money, how the highs and lows, thorns and roses they've had in their investing life. And when they speak to me in that narrative, a whole bunch of lovely data comes out, and I can figure out pretty quick whether they're a fit or not. It's not always obvious. Sometimes you're kind of on the edge and you got to keep figuring it out. But for the most part, you can pretty well figure it out. So be willing to play your own game. You don't have to go copy what someone else does just because they were successful. Figure out how you're wired. Play your game. And then a Wall Street Journal article, Mr. James Haggerty. This is an obituary. It came out today, October 31st. John McQuoon, who pioneered index funds and transformed investing, dies at 90. Now, there's a real important takeaway here. So, McQuoon, sharp guy. He had a degree in mechanical engineering as well as a Harvard MBA when he began his Wall Street career in 1961. Oh, yeah, A&M didn't have an MBA program at that time. Okay. That checks out. He liked making decisions based on proven formulas. But I love this history. In 1971, he led a team at Wells Fargo Bank that created one of the first index funds, aimed at replicating overall market performance rather than picking stocks. A strategy regarded by traditional fund managers as lunacy. Now, here's the difference, because you're probably thinking, wait, Robert, hey, I thought you told me John Bogle was the founder of the index fund, the follower of the index fund. He was our North Star. Well, slow down. The Wells Fargo fund that McQuoon developed was for institutional clients, where John C. Bogle, founder of the Vanguard Group, launched that index fund in 1976. It was for individual investors. And we know how that all worked out. So, this McQuoon, I just love, they detail how he sold it. So he did a whole host of things. He was involved with Dimensional Fund Advisors, which is kind of a factor tilt on index funds. It's like an index fund, but they don't sort by market cap. They'll sort by a whole host of other data. He founded another company. Great. What I loved in this article was when he was first selling the index fund. You know how I always joke on this podcast how no one knocks on your door or takes you to the ball game, and then in between innings and a beer says, hey, can I tell you about a little product called the index fund? Has that ever happened to you? Yeah, me neither. No one's ever taken me to lunch, halfway through lunch, kind of put down the fork and said, hey, have you ever heard of an index fund? I'm waiting. I'm listening. Hasn't happened yet. Don't plan on it. But one of the great moments in this particular article was when it talks about this Mr. McQuoon actually selling the index fund. So he actually had to sell this. So he was one of the few people, and I suppose in the early days that's what occurred, but he really did have to go to people and say, hey, there's this product called the index fund. And he did a bunch of research, John McQuone did, and realized, wait a second. This guy was totally data-driven, by the way. Obsessed with data-driven investment success. And it was these University of Chicago economists who argued that it was futile to beat the stock market in the long run. He was the one who built it into a product for these institutional folks, but he had to sell it. He had to sell it. And he did. He did. So, I love this quote. With index funds, you never apologize for anything, McQueen said in a 2016 interview with the Wall Street Journal, meaning there was never, we overperformed the market. Right? You're selling this product and, no, its job is to be the market. Just to be it. Not beat it, to be it. So, we have a lot to be grateful for, a lot to be thankful for this gentleman and his team that gave us this product that we have today. And then we have time for Robert's Corner. The producers are telling me to keep going, so okay, thank you, gentlemen. Many of you faithful listeners have provided great feedback. A friend of the show, rightly, mentioned that, Robert, when you gave that data point on the S&P 500 over the last 15 years versus housing, I failed to give housing its true day in court. What do I mean? Well, if someone were to compare housing to the S&P 500 in a straight-up manner, one could argue, rightfully, that is too tough a screen for housing. I'll read the quote. If you bought a house for $500,000 15 years ago and sold it for $2.5 million today, you would have still underperformed the S&P 500. Now that's technically true, but what I think the friend of the show and perhaps others were mentioning was, wait. What about the rent? What about the rent, Robert? You're not thinking about the rent cost, and I think that's right. Now, I'm also not thinking about property taxes and repairs and all the rest and insurance. So sometimes, for the sake of simplicity, data will get strewn about. But I did find even more, a larger data set. This is Robert Shiller, who's at Yale, I believe, has something called the Case-Shiller Home Price Index. You can compare it to the S&P 500. And it goes back all the way to 1880, which kind of boggles my mind, and compares housing versus the S&P 500. What I would tell you is the divergence gets more pronounced. So even if we're going to include rent, and even if we're going to try to include various holding and operating costs of home, the point I'd like to make is that be careful thinking that your home is going to outperform as an investment. Usually that is not the case. It's always possible. Always possible. Usually not the case. Usually not. But, very good point. Well said. We welcome more of that sort of feedback here at the podcast because we want to ensure that you, the listener, keep those costs low, keep that investing simple, keep that time horizon long. Do not eat too much candy because that's a bugaboo. Until next time.